So hello and welcome to hopefully the first of many IAB podcasts with our members. And our first one is with Mohammed Karolia, who is actually the IAB Accountant of 2022. So hi, Mohammed.
Hi, Sam. Hi, everybody.
And thanks so much for joining me on this. And I think podcasts actually, and you can probably tell me, Mohammed, for being a member for quite a few years, but podcasts is something we used to do some time ago, and we haven't done for a while. And I guess what kind of gave us the idea of starting it up was back in September last year. You and I attended our first coffee morning on the road session. Which was great. You know, the topic was really relevant in terms of why small businesses need to work with accountants and bookkeepers, and you were on our panel. And I guess from my perspective, what really resonated with me and I thought what really stood out is the approach you take to working with your clients, and how different it is, I guess, than how many people perceive a relationship with an accountant or a bookkeeper. I think most businesses or most people probably in general would see it as firstly very formal. Not to say that it's not your relationship, it's not professional, but formal, but also a bit like, you're on show, you're under interrogation. And your approach to your clients and how you work is completely different. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of that?
Sure, Sam. With me, it's many different ways. I mean, the main one that I love using is when I speak to a client, whether it be on the phone or just in general. I know a lot of accountants tend to say, these are my office hours, here's my business card, come to that office, or phone the reception and book a time. For me, it's a case of, here's my business card, let me know when you're free, and we'll meet in a neutral place, like a coffee shop or a tea shop or something. And I'd go in like how I am now, no shirt and tie, no suit, just casual wear. I'll turn up and I'll sit right back. I'll be like so. And I'd say to them, so tell me about you, tell me who you are. And they go, and they treat it like an interview, some clients, and it's all like, go, I've been in business for so many years. And they're upright, and they sat there thinking, I'll say to them, start again. I'm not asking what you do, I'm asking who you are. What's your name? Where you're from? What do you do? As in, like, what's your sports, hobbies? And this is over in a tea shop, in a public place. We're all sat back. It's very relaxed. I'll say to them, do you want fun? And before we even start, sometimes I'll even ask them if they want anything to eat, like a cake or a biscuit.
Yeah.
And I'll just treat it so casual. And eventually they sort of like let their guard down. And they sort of like feel, so a lot of clients I find, they sort of like think, I've got to be careful what I say, because if I say it's about wrong to this person, he's going to go turn around and tell the government that I'm tax dodging, or I've done something wrong, and he's going to tell the government and I'm going to go in prison. And I've had people use these exact terms to me, and I'm thinking, no, I want to be your friend first. So I want to know who you are, how you do business. And if there's ways I can say to you, look, what you're doing could be, how can I put it, wrong, because you shouldn't handle cash so readily. You should try and do things in the bank, because that way it's more crystal clear as to what you're doing, how you're behaving. And you need to show that, look, I'm me, this is my business, I'm proud of it, I've built it up from nothing, and I want you to help me understand when I'm spending my money and calculate my taxes. That's all I want you to do. And treat it in such a calm manner and such a cool manner. A lot of people, they sort of like realize, hang on, this is an accountant, this is a person. And they sit back, and some people get a bit too overcomfortable and start effing and jiffing a bit. But I'm glad they do, because it makes, I realize then that, okay, now they're relaxed and they'll feel they can talk to me.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and you've just alluded to it there, what do you feel the benefits are of this kind of approach? What have you, I'm sure you've probably got, many great relationships across your client base. What do you feel is the main benefit of taking I suppose, a much more open, laid back approach?
I think having the benefit of that is, I've been in positions with my previous employer where he's very much a headmaster style type of accountant. And a lot of clients, when they speak to me away from my ex-employer, they basically said, I don't feel like saying a lot because I feel if I say something, and it could be wrong, for example, if I've, for example, sold a piece of stock for cash, he's going to end up shouting at me saying, why did you do that for? You shouldn't have done that. Now, how am I going to know how much money you've received? How do I know you've not sold it at a loss? And you don't feel like disclosing that, but by saying me explain to him, look, I know you've taken cash, but write down how much you've taken. So the rest of it, we can understand that you've made a loss here. How do you propose to recover this loss?
Yeah.
I could explain that to him. Whereas if you start shouting, screaming and bawling, or be very formal and be almost to a point like just answer your question, it puts people on the back foot and they sort of like feel I'm being policed here.
Yeah.
If you explain to them, look, this is what, these are your pitfalls, these are your benefits, they're so much more open. And I find that that's a lot more beneficial to clients. And
Yeah.
I've seen with clients, by being like that, they've thrived because they're thinking, do you know what? If I'm open with this fella, he's going to guide me properly. And if I get guided properly, I'm thriving.
Yeah.
And that's what we need.
Yeah,
Really.
I suppose that it's getting the best for both parties out of the relationship, isn't it? Because you're getting
Exactly.
the in-depth information that you need, and your client
Yes.
is relaxed. They're getting the best out of you in terms of advice, which is
Yes.
great. I mean, you touched on it just there in terms of your previous experience. And I was going to ask, you know, where did the thinking for this particular approach come from? Did you used to work in environments that were so far away from this, it kind of made you think, I'm
Yeah.
never going to work like this?
100%. That's exactly what happened. Because I understand my old employer's point of view that you have to keep people in check to a manner of speaking. But having said that, I thought you could do it in a more softer way, because we live in a society where it's very tolerable, it's very understanding society. To bring forth the how can I put it, old headmaster approach, a lot of people will be thinking, I'm not a kid type attitude.
Yeah.
And I've had one client, in fact, I was just doing his accounts before I spoke to yourself. He basically came to me saying, I used to work with your old employer, but I want to get away from him because he's too in your face, and I can't work with that. With this, you're a bit more softer in your approach, and I can work with that.
Yeah.
So that's all, like, told me everything that I needed to know.
Right. Okay, well, that's great. I mean, I suppose in terms of you starting out on your own then and taking this, I suppose, leap for many, I suppose, you know, many people who were employed and then taking the step to be self-employed, you know, what gave you the courage, if you like, and the confidence in which to do that, and how, you know, how did you start out?
Well, kind of a funny thing, really. I'm going to try and backtrack 25 years, so I'll keep it brief. But what happened was, when I was coming out of college, I was crossed between accountancy or law. And a
Right.
friend of mine was a lawyer at the time, and he said to me, you know, if I could do it all over again, I'd be an accountant. So that's all, I just answered the question for me. So I
Yeah.
went into the field, worked in it as a contractor. And once I got to a certain point in life, my wife and I were talking, and she goes to me, you know, you're still only in your 30s, well, back then. And she goes, why don't you go for it? Why don't you go and become an accountant? You know, get the proper qualifications. And I said, oh, no one's going to take me on. I can't go to university or anything now. She goes, but there's got to be other options. And I thought, Open University. Went down the Open University route. And that's where I got introduced to the IAB. Probably
Right.
the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I have to be honest with that. And I'm not saying that to promote the IAB only, but that's actually seriously the single best thing that ever happened to me, was to be introduced to the IAB. And once I got the qualifications, I knew I needed practice experience. So
Yeah.
that's when I worked with Mr. Dawi in his practice. Worked with him thoroughly, exceptionally closely, and learned all I needed to know about practice. And then I just thought, you know what? I've just looked at my diary, looked at how much I've earned for Mr. Dawi, and I thought, if I did my own practice, that'd be all mine. I know it's a bit of
Yeah.
a
Well, no,
greedy
it's a
approach,
good way to
but
look at it, isn't it?
I thought, but I don't know, shall I, shan't I? My wife looked at me and said, I mean, bless her, this is why I love her to bits. She's awesome. She goes to me, there's two ways you could look at this. You could constantly work, earning only 10% of what's written there, or you could pocket the lot for yourself. The choice is yours, but I'll love you either way.
Oh,
And I thought, right, that's my conclusion. So I went in it head first, blind as a bat with it, had no idea who to ask. And the irony is, whilst I was trying to contemplate that idea, I went for a takeaway that night because I couldn't be bothered to help my wife cook. No,
yeah.
I'm going to be honest. So I thought I went for a takeaway. And when I went for a takeaway, I was speaking to the owner of the takeaway, and he said to me, I'm having tax problems. And we got talking and really started understanding one another. And he said to me, I'm having tax problems. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where I'm heading. And I'm thinking about quitting what I'm doing. And I've had enough. And I said to him, look, I tell you what, over the road is a Starbucks. In 2 days' time, we'll have a chat. And in 2 days' time, went to Starbucks, had a chat one-to-one. He told me everything, laid it all out on a plate. And I said, do you know what? I'm going to take you on as a client, and I'm going to work through this with you. Took him on, worked through it with him. 6 months later, his company completely refreshed. Whole new face of the company, whole new menu, everything digital. And he completely revitalized. And when I see him now, he's like, I always see him in a restaurant now and bouncing about, and he's got a great big smile on his face. He's going back to the gym. He's just bought another restaurant, and I'm thinking, that worked. And off the back of the buzz of that, I started approaching other clients in the same way, and I thought, it's worked. That worked. And after that, the rest is history.
That's a really good story, and I think for me at the minute, and it pulls out some really relevant points. I think in that, especially if you're just coming in to this industry, or you have a perception we were talking about before. It can be kind of very black and white of what you think, a finance professional does. It's like, all right, they do the figures and they do the books, but you just kind of touched on a completely different aspect of that in terms of, obviously you took this client on as a person, and you took their business on, but it's almost like you have to wear so many hats, don't you, in a way, in the fact that you just came out there that his business was digital, had a digital menu. It completely changed the way he operated. That touches on marketing, it touches on so many different aspects, and I think people don't necessarily see that. Do you feel that wearing all those hats challenges you? I mean, apart from thinking about the figures, do you have a bit more of a broader picture as to this is what this person could really do with their business?
Yes and no, Sam, because no, in a sense that you look at a person's business and you have absolutely no idea what you're going to do. Because
Mhm.
it could be something completely, you've got no experience or knowledge in that field whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I've had clients that have come in from like the digital marketing area.
Mhm.
I don't know anything about digital marketing. I'm an accountant. How am I
Yeah.
supposed to know?
Yeah.
But long story short, what I've actually done is I've listened to what they've said, and it's all about the listening. And something that somebody told me a long time ago, he goes that you got one mouth and two ears, so you have to work twice as hard listening. That's what he said to me, and I took that on board. And I
Yeah.
thought, I'm just going to listen to everything this person says. I'm not going to say a word. So I stayed silent for a good part of, I'd say, 1.5 hours. Now, for a person like me, that's torture. But
Wow.
I listened to everything he told me. And as he's telling me, I'm just jotting notes down on my pad. And I just said to him, okay, we can go X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and this is how we're going to match it to your accounting. I went, that's a good idea. That works. And right now, he's absolutely thriving. In fact, he's loving it so much. He said to his wife, did your accountant work with Mohammed? He's brilliant. And I'm thinking, I had no idea about digital marketing, but by working with this person and explaining to him, these are the ways to work, this will help you, this will potentially work with you, it actually pushed him forward. He's gone to a position where he's really happy, and he's like going constantly on holiday every few months. And I thought,
Oh, well, that's
well,
good. But I
so
suppose
like so,
there it's looking at synergies, isn't it? In terms of
yes,
synergies in his business and synergies of ways you can work his accounts that would resonate with him, I suppose,
yes. I
isn't
mean,
it?
that's a very good point, Sam. Actually, I think that synergy of matching business to accounts
Hmm.
and helping people understand the impact of the two
Yeah,
and how it can. I mean, everyone on paper and in theory understands that by doing business, you're going to make money and that money is going to be spent and gained XYZ.
hmm,
But to actually practically do it and to try and, how can I put it, utilize it in your favor,
yeah,
I think a lot of people can't quite really get that.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting example. So you also spoke about, I mean, obviously we're not going to dwell on it too much, but in terms of joining the IAB, you found incredibly useful. I think,
Yes.
you know, obviously from an IAB's perspective, it'd be great to understand what you found useful in terms of what, you know, what do you take from your membership to help, you know, push you forward and help you, I suppose, you know, maintain the success you're enjoying.
Well, I'm going to end up sounding like Donkey from Shrek, where he says that phrase, "Oh my God, where do I begin?" I mean, kind
Oh,
of,
so nice.
that's kind of like the approach I could have for IAB in a sense. In terms of like the actual bullet points, if I had to pick out, that would really help me. I'd say that the family feel I get from the IAB,
Hmm.
especially with the ambassadors and the ambassador groups, because a lot of people look at other accountants and see competition, whereas we see family and look after one another as such. And I think that has been proven to be exceptionally useful, simply because you're sharing knowledge, you're
Yeah,
bouncing off one another,
yeah,
and that is so key to success that it's quite petrifying how successful that is. And the other part I'd say, which I really, really, really love, is the coffee mornings and the ambassador meetings, because when we're looking at everything, you're getting fed information and you're writing down notes. For example, yesterday when we were talking about the various ways of handling stress and other parts of it as to how we were going to see changes in the coming year.
hmm,
For example, the IR35, when they were talking about how that potentially could be abolished or it's not,
yeah,
and things like that was sort of like I thought to myself, that's useful information. And I made a
yeah,
note of that as well.
yeah,
So all that constant feed of information and that bounce of one another, I think is brilliant from the IAB. And I think anyone who joins any other organization, as much as they'd be recognized commercially, I
hmm.
think we are a hidden gem in that respect.
Well, that's nice. Like, from a, you know, I suppose collaboration, like you say, it's the greatest source of knowledge because, you know, with so many people all experiencing lots and lots of different things, you can't possibly, you know everything all the time or know
No,
how to
definitely not.
behave in that particular situation. And I think that leads me on to the next question in the fact that if you were not necessarily if you were starting out again, but if you know if you met your someone like yourself, like you say, who was going to do law or accountancy or you know was just starting on their path, what type of advice would you give them? You may give it to many people. I don't know. What advice would you give to somebody just starting out with in this field right now?
Ironic that question that came up because that's my son.
Oh, well, of
So
course, yes, of
he's
course.
my 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Um, what I would the advice I'd give him would be quite simply because if you want to go in accountancy, there's many companies out there, many different organizations, all great, all commercially viable, all professionally viable. But if you really want a hidden gem, we're in a close-knit position where you're given support from when you first register all the way for even an old veteran like myself, who's been a 25-year veteran, still constantly gaining that support and giving that support. IAB has got to be the people you speak to. And taking my son around and constantly exposing him to the IAB,
Mhm.
he's basically just fallen for IAB. He just said, if I go with anyone, I'm not going AAT, I'm not going ACCA. IAB is mine. That's the
Mm.
kind of approach he's taken.
No, but we've met him many times at exhibitions and numerous events, and he does seem extremely hungry for knowledge, which is great. And I
Yes.
suppose that's the appetite that you have to have, don't you? Which is,
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, things are always changing as we know from coffee mornings and everything like that. There's always lots to talk about. And I guess that'd be quite interesting from your perspective. Times of financial hardships is usually a time when business for accountants and bookkeepers tends to thrive. And there's certainly lots of things, coming down the track that will arguably challenge the financial industry. How are you kind of preparing for that? I suppose both personally, but also how do you prepare your clients for any kind of? I mean, I suppose MTD, which was meant to happen, which is now not happening. But how do you prepare clients for change, and how do you prepare yourself?
Well, first thing, and I think it's the most important thing about change, isn't just reading the notes and then just putting on a shelf and forgetting about it, which we're all guilty of, even I am, I have to admit. It's read the change and understand the change
Mm.
and practically put yourself through that change. But it doesn't have to be online or through a official source. But ask yourself, for example, if a lot of people are thinking, "Oh, do I want to go MTD? How do I do MTD? Sugars, what do I do? I've got my head exploding." I've basically said to them, "Look, just take your time. It's easy." And one thing I've done, another thing I do with clients is I basically take the categories of profit and loss, and I just put right on top sales. But on a second tab on Excel, I say to them, write what you sell or the services you sell. Here's a formula to add everything up. I've linked it for you to your master sheet. Now, just enter the information yourself. You don't have to do anything else. I've basically given you the outline. And as they're doing it, it's not like nurtures people through.
Mhm.
And they go, "Oh, this is a bit long-winded, but I can see where I'm going." And I'll
Yeah.
say to them, "I know MTD has been delayed to no fault of anyone's. Have you considered just, how can I put it, softly entering into what I use Sage Start and understand where you're heading?"
Mhm.
Because I personally, I try and go with the change best I can, as quickly as I can. And
Yeah.
as people have been doing that, they realize, hang on, MTD's not all that bad. Actually, there's more uses to it than we realize.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have this fear. I don't know if it's a subconscious fear or if it's a fear of a million and one things, but there is a fear in people that they have that if I go MTD, then I do something wrong and my taxes are going to be 20, 30 grand. And I go, not necessarily. This is
Mm.
where the accountants and the bookkeepers come in. We look
Yeah.
at where you've categorized everything. Have you actually categorized everything smoothly and correctly? If that's the case, and then you'll see that your tax is more manageable than you realize.
Mm.
And a lot of people have noticed that about it,
Mhm.
that MTD is nothing to be afraid of. If embraced properly and understood smoothly, then the tax is manageable and it's a lot happier for them.
Mhm.
And I found that when people understood that and they've sort of like embraced it, some people will always resist. They'll say, "I'm still paying too much tax." And you're thinking to
Yeah.
yourself, "I'm not going to say anything." Type thing. But when they've seen how it's manageable and how the money coming in, money going out is smooth and it's still left with a huge chunk in their pocket, you
Mhm.
sort of treat it like, "I'm happy."
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
all people want.
Yeah. And I guess, the example that you just gave then is still ringing true to your general approach, and in the fact that, if you just get somebody just to download what they do every day, and then arguably relate that back to how you want to interpret MTDs, even that's just through a simple spreadsheet. It's a softly, if you like, I suppose, stepping stone approach, but it engages them, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which I think which is, you know, going back to your approach again, which I think is why it's so refreshing, in the fact that it is kind of like people related, which I think is great. I think it's a completely refreshing approach from a sector perspective. Well, it's been great speaking to you. I think
Thank you.
we've kind of covered off quite a lot. I suppose it kind of like it just left said to remain. As I opened up, you're the IAB accountant for 2022, and you've got many other accolades. What are your hopes for the future? Have you got any challenges that you've set yourself that you want to achieve?
Yes, I have. I think the challenges I've set myself to achieve is to basically grow beyond what I can achieve, really, and always push myself out of my comfort zone, and be in a position where I can work side to side with my boy, and hopefully the two of us can spread the word of the smoothness of accounting and let people realize that accountants are not the police of the government. We're basically the in-between help of the government and the client, in essence.
Excellent. So a good family a family industry then is about to come upon us, which is exciting.
Yes, I hope so.
Well, thanks very much for talking to us today, Mohammed. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.